Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
Tonight, growing outrage over the arrest and lockup of an American citizen in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The ACLU suing a Louisiana sheriff and several others in that parish on behalf of Ramon Torres, a U.S. citizen originally from Honduras. The lawsuit alleging Torres was jailed on suspicion of a DUI. A federal judge ordered him released the next day, but jail authorities actually refused that order. They suspected he was undocumented, even though he had a valid driver's license on him when he was arrested, and even after a friend quickly sent in copies of his Social Security card and American passport. Torres was locked up for 4 days. The sheriff saying it's their policy to contact ICE whenever they suspect someone is undocumented. Another sheriff's employee allegedly saying they do that for all Latinos who are arrested. If true, then these police are changing how they treat people based on their ethnicity or how they look. And that echoes language we heard last month from the acting director of ICE. Watch.
ICE does not have the lawful authority to say anybody is or is not a citizen. What we do is when we are provided with probative evidence that an individual in our custody looks to be a citizen, we will release that individual from custody.
You advance it when they look to be a citizen. It just strikes me that all of these individuals are Latinos, and that you're talking about how someone looks. So can you talk to me a little bit about...
I was not referring to anybody's appearance, and that was clear if anybody listened to the context of what I was saying.
All right, with me now is Alana Odoms-Hebert, Executive Director of the ACLU of Louisiana, the group behind this lawsuit. Great to have you with us this evening. Let's start with the lawsuit itself. Why did the ACLU file this lawsuit on behalf of Mr. Torres?
The ACLU of Louisiana filed this lawsuit because we believe it is unconscionable for a person, a U.S. citizen, to be detained and incarcerated based on their looks, based on their race, or based on ethnicity. It is a violation of Mr. Torres's constitutional rights, both his 4th and 14th Amendment constitutional rights, and the ACLU wants to be on the front lines of this battle against President Trump's mass deportation agenda here in Louisiana.
Do you have any evidence, or do you believe that authorities have now at least admitted that ethnicity, or his ethnicity to be specific, was a factor in his detention?
Well, I can tell you this. Mr. Torres had a valid Social Security card. He had a valid Louisiana driver's license, which you cannot obtain unless you provide proof of citizenship. He had a passport, and his family members and coworkers provided additional proof that he was a U.S. citizen. And so once the sheriff's office received that information and decided to continue to hold Mr. Torres, even despite a judge's orders, what else can a reasonable person think other than the sheriff was holding Mr. Torres based upon his ethnicity and suspicion that he was in this country as an undocumented person?
How was Mr. Torres' time in jail? How was he treated while he was there, despite the fact that he tried to prove his citizenship?
Mr. Torres recounts that there were many other individuals who were not represented, who were similarly situated, whose rights were likely being violated as well. And so we know that this is not an isolated case. And we also know that many of the facilities that are being used to house folks in Louisiana are facilities that are essentially were deemed very violent places, very brutal places. And so this is certainly not a place that any citizen would want to end up, and certainly not in the circumstances that we found Mr. Torres in.
So let me juxtapose your answer that you just said there for us with how the Trump administration and border officials within that administration have described immigration detention facilities. Watch this.
So if you think of yourself as a college dormitory, that's what the rooms look like.
They are campus-like settings with appropriate medical, educational, recreational, dining, and private housing facilities.
I think the best way to describe them is to be more like a summer camp.
Your reaction to that?
I'm appalled. And I think every citizen in this country should be appalled. We have more detention facilities opening every day in Louisiana than any other place in the country. And that is because Louisiana is a place where the immigration judges are more stringent than other places in the country. These detention facilities are in remote locations where lawyers cannot access their clients. And we've already seen stories of folks being tear gassed for exercising their First Amendment rights. When they do hunger protests and things of this nature, they've been beaten, they've been tear gassed. It is unconscionable that someone would describe these circumstances as a summer camp. I would not allow my child to be in those facilities. All of us as Americans should be outraged that this is being characterized in this way. It's not only a mischaracterization, it's insulting and it's unconstitutional.
It is Tuesday, the 27th of August of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Just a small, scant dash of smoked hot Hungarian paprika makes all the difference in the world. It truly does. You should try it. Well, Brett Stevens, we hardly bedbugged ye. What a snowflake. God, these public intellectuals on the right, and not just Brett Stevens. You also got Ben Shapiro, too. Oh, my God, between the two of them. And don't forget Charlie Kirk, the up-and-coming phenom. Oh, God. Well, you know, they do have a farm club. And they, groom these types right on up, and then they farm them out to various organizations to, bedbug from within. I don't get it. Brett Stevens, what a thin-skinned little snowflake. You can dish it, but you can't take it. They never can. They never do. All right, well, enough on that. And Ben Shapiro, you don't know shit about slavery, you racist pug. And I don't even want to get into Charlie Kirk. He's like the larval bedbug. Still can do damage. Be careful. Yeah. All right. Well, there's lots more going on in the world. In fact, it's a conflagration. The Amazon continues to burn, and Bolsonaro, what a God. Another one of those types. You know, the type that we have sitting in the Oval Office. So he not only insults Macron and his wife like Trump did to Ted Cruz. Now, I'm no big fan of Ted Cruz, but come on. It is just so childish and petty to talk about someone's wife or girlfriend's looks. I mean, come on. But I guess there's a constituency, and we know who they are, that just lap that up. They like that. They think that that's all right until it's done to them. So here's Bolsonaro on his third wife. God, that's pretty familiar, isn't it? 27 years his junior. Now, of course, in Macron and Burgess' case, it's the opposite. She's 27 years older than he is. She's 67 and he's 41. So what does that pan out to? Regardless. I got to say, she looks pretty damn good for 67. Though that's even terrible to say for 67. Regardless. So Bolsonaro insults Macron's wife, and then he turns down, I got to say, this $20 million that they were throwing at, Brazil to, firefight the wildfires in the Amazon is a pittance. Just a pittance. But I must say that all the G7 countries and a lot of others around the world pay into what's known as the Brazil Fund to keep the Amazon standing. So it's really rich for a Bolsonaro to say, we're not going to take that money because you could take your colonial attitude and stuff it. Which is really odd coming from the progeny of colonialists who are trying to colonize the Amazon. Now, to his credit, Bolsonaro did send in the military to fight these fires. But of course, in Brazil, you got to kill all the indigenous people first. Or just drive them into the fire and let nature take its course. The military going into the Amazon to fight the fires? Please. With Bolsonaro at the head? We know exactly what's going to happen, and it's exactly as I stated. They're going to drive indigenous peoples into the fire and let nature take its course. Unless, of course, the indigenous people don't like that idea, and then the military will just have to, take care of the matter in their own hands then and there, which they've done repeatedly. All right, so we got that going for us, which is not too nice. Not too nice. Okay, and, do we want to talk about Kashmir and India and all that? Oh, you don't know there's nuclear rattlings going on there, too. Haven't heard anything about that, have you? Uh-huh. Okay, this is the world we live in. And I think that we really need to work hard to make sure this guy is taken, I don't know, to a hospital? Can you do that while he's still sitting in office? No, I think that there's a little-known OLC memo that if the President of the United States falls into a deep, dark depression in which he wants to not only nuke hurricanes, but maybe he wants to nuke the Amazon and put out the fires that way. You can't put him in a padded cell. Because he's the President of the United States. They have certain inalienable rights, apparently, which are far above and beyond anything that any normal human being would have, because actually, it's just another confirmation in his mind that he is the chosen one. Yeah, he was kidding. He was kidding when he said he was the chosen one. Every guy kids when they get caught trying to F you. Everyone. Mm-hmm. Yep. Well, how do I know? Well, some people have to evolve now, don't they? They must. And they should. And they better. All right. What's on the rest of the menu here? I could just go on and on and on, which I do. But we try to restrain ourselves a little bit with a curated show. You can't just, keep throwing out stuff that you're making up, from the kitchen, because it takes a bit of work to get to that point. So you might be having it a little too raw. Okay. On the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. At the top, of course, that was a rundown by the executive director of the ACLU in Louisiana, commenting on an American citizen who was held by Louisiana officials, a sheriff and his minions. And he was supposed to be released, and they wouldn't do it because he was Mexican. Well, Hispanic, but it's Mexican to them. If they come from Bolivia, Mexican. They come from Honduras, Mexican. They come from Guatemala, Mexican. Come from Chile, Mexican. Peru, Mexican. Mexican. So the Louisiana sheriff and his minions there said, oh, well, this guy has a birth certificate? And his family and friends are coming here to prove he's a citizen? No way, he's Mexican. So they held him so that ICE could pick him up. I told you so. Yep. You give a Teutonic authoritarian regime a cookie? Mm-hmm. They're going to make sure the death camps have a dairy. You know they will. On the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, the Kentucky GOP is wasting thousands of dollars to build a wall in the State House so they don't have to sit near Democrats. The only thing Republicans hate more than Mexicans is Democrats. We're not real people now. Truly, we're not. Listen to them. They'll tell you. A bland announcement in the Federal Register marks the beginning of the end of the Fed's 50-year Reefer Madness crusade. Ooh, the worm turns. The worm turns. And thanks to Mitch McConnell, the U.S. now has no functioning election commission. Well, Moscow Mitch can't have people voting. You can't have oversight on elections when you are Moscow Mitch. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where a Chinese-born Australian writer held in China since January has been formally arrested on espionage charges. Took him a while. But, hey, what's happening in Hong Kong? And this guy was a democracy advocate back in the day. And Amnesty International named 5 new political prisoners in Cuba. The more things change, the more things don't. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice to the rightish of the page, right there by the social media scroll, is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly, for doing that. To the leftish of the page from the social media scroll chat room link, at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice the link to our Patreon site. And yes, do please become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, that recurring contribution, which doesn't have to be very much, $3-5, you know, the cost of what you might pay for a espresso type coffee drink. If you could buy one of those once a month for us, and instead of sending us the coffee, send us the funds, we stretch those dollars beyond compare, because we've been doing it for over 8 years now, celebrating our 8th anniversary of continuous 24/7, 365 Resistance Radio, as the founders originally intended all those many, 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 many decades ago. Way back. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio, it is so simple. Just go to @Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we are so thankful that he does. I take care of @Justice Putnam. Follow me there. And I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Coast about 10 minutes before showtime, and then get that link up on social media as quickly as possible. Follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest, and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and really wherever podcasts can be found, because they're all out there. Billions of them. And we're down in the W's. That's right. Okay. Before we get started here in this first offering of the Bistro Cafe, I just wanted to mention, just since the beginning of the year when I started what I called my Chronicle of Grief. Oh yeah, that was when my son passed, my adult son at age 41. And it was really hard, as one would expect. It's a shock. And so I've been able to cope, though every day, and I just want to mention this because every day things just wash over me, and I just miss him so much. I know it hasn't been quite a year yet, getting close, but I had a fairly good day yesterday, and then I don't know, it was just something. Well, I know what it was, but I fell into that morass of grief again and just weepy. And what started it, I think the term now is trigger, was this innocuous tweet, these lists like, what's your 5 favorite songs or whatever. And Kimberly Johnson had one up about what was, 5 movies that made you weep. And she listed hers, and then it made me think, and I started thinking about movies I'd seen, because I was a cinephile from way back, starting at a very, very early age. We lived next door to a big drive-in theater in Springfield, Oregon, the Highway 39 theater, by the way. Right out there on the way up to Sisters into the Cascades out of Eugene, Springfield. And we lived right there, so and we could hear the movie from our backyard because we were that close. You could hear the speakers. If you turn the car speakers up, the line of them right next to our house, you could hear. So it was great. I remember my parents and other people in the neighborhood having little backyard parties and barbecues and watch the movie. So I started doing that about age 3. But I started going through these movies that made me weep. And I remember A Patch of Blue with Sidney Poitier. And that made me weep. That was a weepy one for me when I was a kid. And then I started going through some others, and it occurred to me that these are all movies that I took my son to when he was just a little guy. So he couldn't be exposed to the things that made me cry. What a dad. But I started thinking about that, and it made me cry. These were all movies that I took my son to see because, well, they made me cry. I wanted to share that with him. But I do miss him. I suppose in the greater cosmic scheme of things, is he really gone? Are we ever? Well, we're going to find out, or we're not. What is consciousness, and does it really matter in the cosmic scheme of things? I'm sure Berkeley, Hume, and Kant considered that. I'm sure they did. All right, enough of that. Let's get on with this first offering here. Yeah, I miss my son. All right, this first offering is by Lisa Needham out of Share Blue Media. In a move as petty as it is outrageous, Kentucky Republicans are building a literal wall in their state capital office annex. It's also 3 GOP senators won't have to sit anywhere near Democrats. Now, Republicans hold all 3 branches of government in Kentucky. Hi, Mitch. Moscow Mitch. Been working hard there, too, I see. But they hold a particularly large advantage in the state Senate chamber, 29 Republicans to just 9 Democrats. See what gerrymandering does? That may be what has led to a shared office suite. There are just too many Republicans to go around. Well, that's an evergreen if I ever heard one. But even sharing a suite, not sharing an office, mind you, but a suite, is too much for the Kentucky GOP. So they're going to spend $12,000 of taxpayer money, which they don't have, by the way. They got to take it from some other programs. Why not take it away from starving kids to build a wall? And to construct a physical wall between the two parties. Let me remind people that in urban planning, even in rural planning, what made America so beautiful is that we came out of this walled society, these castle-walled societies of Europe. All right? And we came to America and we wanted the people to be the government. And how do you do that? You're open. Right? You have these open front yards and you have these great porches in front of your house, and you're looking out at the road in front of you and you're saying hi to your neighbors. People walk by, you don't know who they are. Hi there, neighbor. Everybody's a neighbor. Everybody's front yard is open. And who wanted gated communities and walled little compounds so they could put their mega mansions in? Who would that be? The new aristocracy? The landed gentry? New money? Mm-hmm. What happens when you get a bunch of people with new money and they want to live behind a gate in a compound? The way I look at it is they're exactly where they need to be when we decide to re-educate them all. Maybe. Well, Republican leaders confirmed to a local newspaper, the Courier-Journal, by the way, that the move was purely for partisan reasons, and Republican Senate President Bob Stevens is behind it all. Now, this is Republican leaders saying this. When you only have 9 Democrats, I'm pretty sure they hunker down. The move is typical of the modern GOP on both the state and federal level. Here, Kentucky Republicans are actively and literally shutting out Democrats merely because they can. They don't want to hear from Democrats. They don't want to sit near Democrats, and they don't want to work with Democrats. So why not construct a physical barrier so they don't have to? Additionally, the GOP is spending money the state can ill afford to spend. By any metric, Kentucky is struggling. With a poverty rate of over 18%, the state ranks 47th in the country. Wow. The poverty rate for children is much higher, over 25%. Its unemployment rate is 4.1, is higher than the national average of 3.7. Thanks to an absolutely wrecked state budget, Kentucky had to slash public education funding. Well, of course, they've been doing that. And wanting to complete the task for, I don't know, what's the Soviet model again? 70 years? That's right. 70 years. One Kentucky county, Harlan, relies more on public assistance than nearly any other county in America. Just don't call them socialists. The state is in a full-blown pension crisis. Well, of course, raise the pensions, give it to the upper 1%. Meanwhile, the Kentucky GOP somehow found money to build a wall so they don't have to sit by their duly elected colleagues. Looks like the GOP can actually build a new wall when it puts its mind to it. Pike of Think Progress brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. Well, the federal government announced plans to expand cannabis research yesterday, Monday, paving the way for the robust clinical trials cannabis experts believe will force the government to downgrade Cannabis's Controlled Substance Act classification. I should mention that a lot of people do use the M word. We'll just say it real quick here, marijuana. But the Netroots Radio Style Manual prevents us here at Netroots Radio from using that racist term. And I know many people have argued that it's not racist, but the Style Manual says don't use it, so we're not going to. We'll call it pot, grass. I always like grass. I hated grass. But regardless, we'll call it cannabis or some other term rather than the M word, if you don't mind. Now, the decision comes just 2 days before a key deadline in a lawsuit against the agency brought by cannabis researcher Dr. Sue Sisley of the Scottsdale Research Institute. Sisley had sought to end 3 years of stalling by the DEA. Monday's regulatory filing and the warm remarks from Attorney General William Barr that accompanied it in a press release effectively mean Dr. Sisley is won. Coupled with Barr's ardently anti-pot predecessor Jeff Sessions' departure, progress toward looser federal treatment of cannabis may resume. Now, of course, you remember Jeff Sessions said that he was really into whatever the KKK was doing until he found out they were smoking pot. Really? Did that really stop you, Jeff? Did it really? Until today, no one could do anything. We were handcuffed in limbo, said Shane Pennington, a member of Dr. Sisley's legal team. Now they've done something. It's a huge, huge deal. Now, the actual notice published in the Federal Register is characteristically dry, but it says the DEA will soon unveil a proposed regulation to govern applications to grow cannabis for scientific and medical research. Oh, my. You mean it's not just to make rope? Because they were trying to put a clamp on that, too, apparently. Because I think maybe because of the plastic rope manufacturers. It makes one wonder. Now, the monopoly on production has hampered researchers by Dr. Sisley for years because for half a century, only one grow was legally approved for purposes of scientific and medical research. A University of Mississippi facility contracted by the National Institute on Drug Abuse. Do they really make good pot in Mississippi? Let's go to the Emerald Triangle, man. So, the UMISS project only produced a handful of strains of cannabis, and their cultivation methods produced low-grade flower. Go to the Emerald Triangle, man. Jeez. Okay. So, Dr. Sisley's research, which probes cannabis's potential to treat post-traumatic stress disorder, and focuses on combat vets, because if you want to get anything done, yeah, why not patronize the military and use them for your devilish means? Everybody does. So the announcement was greeted with great fanfare in the research and drug policy communities and prompted Dr. Sisley to apply for a research grow license from the DEA later that year. But it was only a departmental policy. There was no follow-through. Nobody at the government would respond to her application or the dozens of others filed since, and because there were no federal regulations related to the 2016 policy memorandum, Dr. Sisley's attorney explained it was almost impossible to force the agency to do what it promised. Wow. You mean William Barr's DOJ? Makes one wonder. Despite the good news, Dr. Sisley cautioned Monday that the new regs leave the DEA plenty of room for further shenanigans. Now we just need to keep the DEA's feet to the fire, Sisley said in a statement. DEA, DOJ can slow roll this for many years to come, leaving progress of medical cannabis research in limbo indefinitely. But at least the door is now theoretically kicked down. The agency could have taken this step with no fanfare had it wished, but it got a full press rollout from the Department of Justice. Wow. I am pleased that DEA is moving forward with its review of applications for those who seek to grow cannabis legally to support research, Attorney General Barr said in a statement on the agency's move. The only thing is that I know this guy Barr. I think he's using this as a dodge to now go and send his, jackboots to jack legal pot shops in the states that have legal pot. And we know it's certainly not beneath him. And you don't need to smoke any pot to have just a little bit of paranoia of what Barr is capable of. Israel of Think Progress brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Federal Election Commission, affectionately known as the FEC, intended to be a group of no more than 3 Democrats and no more than 3 Republicans, and they were to oversee the federal campaign finance system. Now, it's been operating with just a bare quorum of 4 for the past 18 months. Now, with the resignation of Vice Chairman Matthew Peterson at the end of the week, the commission will virtually be paralyzed. The reason for this? Senate Majority Leader Moscow Mitch McConnell, Repug of Kentucky, and his Republican-controlled U.S. Senate. Now, to be clear, the FEC is a peculiar agency. It was created in 1974 to enforce finance laws for House, Senate, presidential, and vice presidential campaigns. Oh, you mean it comes out of Watergate? No wonder it's being left to wither and die in the Grim Reaper's house. Unlike most agencies, neither party is allowed to hold a working majority of seats at any time. Scott Harshberger, the former president of the campaign finance reform group Common Cause, I should pronounce his name properly, Scott Harshbarger, once quipped that the FEC is probably the only agency in Washington that has done from the beginning exactly what it was intended to do, which was to do nothing. Oh, what a quip. But while the commission has often deadlocked along party lines, especially in recent years, it still has played some role in issuing fines, auditing campaign filings, and investigating corruption. With just 3 active members, it will be able to do none of that just in time for the election. Feature or a bed bug? The 6 commissioners are appointed by the president. Oh, feature or a bed bug? I suppose in this instance that might be the same thing. It just might. Okay, so the commissioners, all 6, are appointed by the president, subject to Senate confirmation. Oh, really? I guess we'll just have some acting members then. Can they do that? We'll see. And they are to serve a single 6-year term. The terms are staggered, so 2, typically 1 Democratic and 1 Republican commissioner, are up every 2 years. If no successor is confirmed, commissioners may stay on as long as they are willing. While the positions were once filled in pairs with little fanfare, since McConnell, an avowed foe of campaign finance law, I wonder why. Moscow Mitch. Well, when he became majority leader in 2015, I think we should follow the rubles and see how long Moscow Mitch has been in bed with not just Deripaska. You thought I was going to go all the way to Vlad? No, they work your way up to Vlad. When they turn you slow and easy. Well, Peterson and the remaining commissioners are all serving expired terms. Trump has made little effort to appoint new commissioners since taking office. Well, why not? When you're installed by Vlad, do you really want an agency to look into it? McConnell has dubbed himself the Grim Reaper, blocking all legislative action in the U.S. Senate. I should say not all, but virtually all. And focusing almost exclusively on confirming Trump's nominees to the bench in particular. And back in 2010, Barack Obama's first nominee to the FEC, John J. Sullivan, withdrew from consideration despite strong bipartisan support after waiting more than a year for a vote in the full Senate. So he was the Grim Reaper as soon as the black guy took office. Feature or a bedbug? All right, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we're going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
We're draining the swamp, Donald Trump bragged in June, declaring victory over the unholy alliance of lobbyists and donors and special interests who made a living bleeding our country dry. Bravo! But wait, where did all those swamp critters go? Right into Trump's corporate cozy administration, where they continue serving the unholy alliance that's bleeding our country dry. Trump's government has consistently sided with corporations over workers, the environment, consumers, and the common good because corporate executives and lobbyists have become Trump's government. His Interior Secretary was an oil lobbyist. His Treasury chief came straight from Wall Street. His EPA honcho lobbied for big coal. His health department is headed by a drug company executive, and on down the line to undersecretaries, bureau directors, etc., etc. About the grossest example of Trump Inc. is the Education Department, headed by billionaire heiress Betsy DeVos. She's turned the department into a handmaiden for the corrupt, for-profit college industry, which has ripped off millions of students and billions of our tax dollars. DeVos has twisted law and logic to try to bail out and resurrect the Wall Street-backed for-profit educational system. Her investors first perversion of public education's mission, backed by her political patron Trump, has brought great cheer to the corporate chieftains running these scams. One of the profiteers even penned an ode to the Donald, hailing him as the savior of this sleazy industry. We've got a friend in Trump. He's lifting us out of our slump. We were down and life was rough. Too many regs. We're way too tough. After so many years, we've just had enough. But now we've got a friend in Trump. This is Jim Hightower saying, as Lily Tomlin puts it, no matter how cynical you get, it's almost impossible to keep up.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata.
The Curiosity rover was never fully sterilized before it touched down on Mars, and there's been debate whether the rover drill might contaminate certain subsurface areas thought to potentially harbor life. But it turns out the rover may not need to physically drive somewhere to pollute that spot with Earth's microbes, because if there are any tiny Earthlings on the rover, the strong winds on Mars might be able to spread them around the red planet instead.
Wind storms are very common on Mars, even at the planetary scale. So you have one point of contamination, given the proper condition, you could disperse whatever you were carrying there to distant places.
Armando Asua-Bustos, a research scientist at the Center for Astrobiology at the Superior Council of Scientific Research in Spain. Asua-Bustos is now more certain that such spread might be possible because of an experiment his team carried out in Chile's Atacama Desert, the conditions of which make it a popular Mars analog. There, his team placed petri dishes along two paths cutting from the coast into the driest parts of the Atacama. One path was 30 miles long, the other 40 miles long, and they waited for winds to deliver coastal dust to the petri dishes. And then they grew whatever landed. On both paths, they found a multitude of viable bacterial and fungal species, which suggests that microbes are indeed able to fly over the driest and most UV-blasted desert on Earth in just a matter of hours, and arrive unharmed. The details are in the journal Scientific Reports. The researchers say wind could therefore be a way to easily contaminate another planet with Earth microbes if spacecraft aren't sterilized, or a way for Martian life in once fertile areas to hitchhike to others by flying on dust in the wind.
Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This is a message from CDC.
After hurricanes, tornadoes, and floods, standing water and excess moisture help mold grow in your home, garage, and other structures. When you return to a home that has been flooded, know that you're likely to have mold. Mold puts your family's health at risk. If you have mold growing in your home, you should clean it up and fix other water problems, such as leaks in roofs, walls, or plumbing. Keep your children and pets out of affected areas until you've cleaned. Control moisture in your home to prevent mold growth. To remove mold growth from hard surfaces, use commercial products, soap and water, or a bleach solution of no more than 1 cup of household laundry bleach in 1 gallon of water. Follow the manufacturer's instructions. Never mix bleach with ammonia or other household cleaners. It will produce dangerous, toxic fumes. Open windows and doors to provide fresh air.
For more information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. Netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
The 13th Amendment, ratified in 1865, that abolished slavery and involuntary servitude, has one enormous exception. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The exception is, and I quote the amendment, except as punishment for crime. And today, the United States, which has 4% of the world's population, has 22% of all the world's prisoners. As Brian Stevenson, founder of the Equal Justice Initiative and author of Just Mercy, writes in his contribution to the 1619 Project, quote, central to understanding the practice of mass incarceration and excessive punishment is the legacy of slavery. After the Civil War, Southern states passed the Black Codes, a series of laws that locked up and subjugated former slaves. Again, quoting Stevenson, Nixon's war on drugs, mandatory minimum sentences, 3 strikes laws, children tried as adults, broken window policing. These policies were not as expressly racialized as the Black Codes, but their implementation has been essentially the same. Stevenson points out that there is new language that has replaced the Black Codes: driving while black, sitting in a coffee shop while black, in a word, living while black. And in the same vein, he writes, quote, it has been black people and brown people who are disproportionately targeted, stopped, suspected, incarcerated, and shot by the police. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1950. At 4 p.m. on that day, the U.S. Army completed its takeover of the country's railroads. They were acting on the orders of President Harry S. Truman. Two unions, the Brotherhood of Railroad Trainmen and the Order of Railway Conductors, had threatened a national strike. In the years after World War II, a wave of strikes passed through almost every major industry in the United States. Labor unrest, bottled up by war production, overflowed as the war ended. In 1946 alone, there were more than 5,000 strikes across the nation. Then, in 1950, the United States entered the Korean War. President Truman was determined that railway transport would not be slowed by a strike. He used the war as a justification to seize control of the railroads. The federal government had similarly intervened with the railroads during World War I. Truman established an emergency board to help settle the railroad labor dispute. The unions refused the proposed settlement. The president issued a public statement declaring the railroads essential to the national defense and security of the nation. The Secretary of the Army, Frank Pace Jr., backed up the president. He declared, "We must not permit the flow of essential support to the forces in Korea to be interrupted." The unions went on strike, but Army personnel kept the trains running. In May of 1952, the Union strike ended in defeat. The strikers returned to work under the conditions proposed by the president. Truman tried a similar federal takeover of the steel industry when those workers threatened to strike. However, the steel mill owners fought the takeover all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court and won their case. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 58 degrees Fahrenheit, which is rather nice. It won't last long. We are under a excessive heat warning because we are expected to top out about 107 degrees Fahrenheit.
Overnight lows in the low 70s, what seems pretty high to me. Tomorrow, we're expected to have a precipitous drop in temperature. We're going to be down to about 102, with an overnight low in the upper 60s. So we got that going for us, which is nice, I suppose. Winds will be light and variable in the midst of all this, damn it. We want the scouring winds. And of course, dry conditions will continue. Grass pollen is low. How nice. Air quality index remains hovering in the good range, in the mid-30s range, this time at 37 parts per million. And that daytime UV index remains high at 7. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.87 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 65%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 93 and sunny with a heat advisory. Paris is 95 and sunny with a heat advisory. Rome is 88 degrees and fair with no heat advisory. Fancy that. Kiev is 82 and fair. Kabul is 81 degrees and fair. Hong Kong is 81 and fair with a 80% chance of heads being cracked by the military. Tokyo is 76 degrees with rain and a flood advisory. Sydney, Australia is 55 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 degrees and partly cloudy. And New York is 72 degrees Fahrenheit and fair as the Big Apple is fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Jonathan Barrett and Colin Packham of Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A Chinese-born Australian writer held in China since January has been formally arrested on suspicion of espionage, the Australian Chinese government said today, Tuesday, amid growing diplomatic tension between Canberra and Beijing. Yang Hangjun, a former Chinese diplomat turned online journalist and blogger, was detained in the southern city of Guangzhou while waiting for a transfer to Shanghai after flying in from New York. He was later moved to the capital, Beijing. Oh, he had a stopover in China to get back to Australia. How convenient. Dr. Yang has been held in Beijing at harsh conditions without charge for more than 7 months. Foreign Minister Maurice Payne said in a statement, adding Yang was formally arrested on suspicion of spying last Friday, and espionage is punishable by death in China, and they even make you pay for your own bullets. The arrest of Yang, age 53, whose legal name is Yang Jun, comes as Beijing struggles to contain anti-government protests in Hong Kong, the semi-autonomous Chinese city. Well, the case is further processed, and Yang is in good health with his rights fully guaranteed, a Chinese spokesman said. Yang's wife, who is an Australian permanent resident, has also been barred from leaving China. And I should mention that Yang was part of the democracy movement that took over Tiananmen Square in 1989.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Sarah Marsh, also of Reuters, brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Amnesty International named 5 new prisoners of conscience in Cuba on Monday yesterday and said their detention underscored how the presidential handover last year from Raul Castro had not changed the communist-run country's repressive tactics. Amnesty said there were likely many more Cubans who had been detained for peacefully expressing their views, whose cases it was a challenge to document because authorities deny access to international rights groups. All of the prisoners listed were associated with opposition organizations in the one-party state. For decades, Cuba has stifled freedom of expression and assembly by locking up people for their beliefs and opposition to the government, said Erica Guevara Rosas, America's director at Amnesty International. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but Netroots Radio's going to broadcast on. In fact, we're going to meet up tomorrow for Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon